But for job security is more of a concern now in a time of COVID-19. In its latest macroeconomic review, the Monetary Authority of Singapore today said wages are likely to be harder hit than employment.
However, workers in the retail trade, F&B and recreation sectors are most vulnerable to layoffs. This is despite government support measures like wage subsidies and loan schemes.
So let's delve deeper with Chief Economist at OCBC Bank, Selina Ling. Now, Selina, MAS expects wage cuts to occur in various sectors, from transportation and storage services to accommodation and food services, financial services as well. So does this point to the need for more government aid? For example, the 75% wage subsidy is only for April and May so far. So do you think that should be extended?
Well, I think the COVID-19 pandemic story obviously is still evolving very rapidly. At this juncture, it's hard to say whether the 75% wage offset should be extended. I think what we recognize is that Singapore is a small open economy. It's not just an issue about Singapore's circuit breaker being lifted on the 1st of June. I think we also have to look in terms of the global economy and the regional lockdowns as well. I think the fact is that even if we do see the circuit breaker being lifted on 1st of June, if the regional economies continue to have infection numbers and continue to have containment measures, that will also have some economic spillover effects on the Singapore economy. So I think net really, in terms of the outlook for the industries, a lot of the hardest hit industries would be the tourism and transport related ones, especially including the F&B and retail sector also. We do think that post the circuit breaker, there should be some improvement in terms of demand domestically, but whether this will actually return, to the pre-circuit breaker days, I think at this juncture it still looks very, very tentative. We are expecting that the recovery story in the second half will be a lot more subdued. Whether the government actually wants to extend the job support scheme and also some of the other foreign worker incentives as well, I think at this measure, at this juncture, really is a risk-reward ratio. I think that it would be very unlikely that we'll see a permanent institution of some of these schemes, but they may be open to a temporary extension.
Now, MAS didn't give any forecast figures for retrenchments, but what is your projection and how does it compare to previous recessions?
Well, I think it's very hard to try and put an estimate on how bad the unemployment picture could get, mainly because in the past, even during the Asian financial crisis, it was more economic crisis. During the GFC, it was really more a financial crisis. But this time around, we are having both a healthcare pandemic and on top of that, economic crisis in terms of the demand shock and global supply chain disruptions as well. So it's a bit of a double whammy. It is very likely that we could actually get unemployment rising above 3%, possibly closer to 4% by the end of the year. What this entails would be that the number of displaced workers could be as high as 65,000. So this would be a bit more severe compared to both the GFC and the AFC. But this picture may also continue to evolve depending on how long the circuit breaker lasts, if it gets lifted earlier, or even to the extent that whether the government continues to put on additional measures like the job support scheme in order to try and mitigate the potential layoff situations and to keep firms on a survival footing until this whole COVID-19 crisis passes. So my sense is that it will continue to deteriorate in the quarters ahead, but some of the pain in the sense is being borne by the government.
Right. Well, I have a two-part question on those employed in the retail, F&B and recreation industry, some of the sectors that are hardest hit. Would people be more wary of joining these sectors in the future, and what long-term impact would that have?
I think actually even in the run-up to before this whole COVID-19 pandemic, the policy measures in terms of foreign workers was already quite tight, in particular for the F&B and retail services sector. So, in a sense, the players in these areas were actually getting a bit used to trying to move away from intensive manpower usage to a more technology investments and using digital platforms. So I think it just probably accelerated the whole process. I think what will change is that, going forward, a lot more of the consumption may be done online. They will probably use a lot more digital platforms and technology instead of manpower. We may not get the case where it returns to business as usual even after this COVID-19 pandemic. I think, if anything, the silver lining from this whole COVID-19 pandemic is that it's accelerated a lot of that digital transformation in a very short period of time. As to whether workers would want to join these sectors, I guess at the end of the day, if the growth prospects are there and the wage prospects remain attractive, then they would want to join these sectors. But as we've seen in the past, because a lot of the retail and F&B face very high overhead structural issues and competition in the industry itself, obviously they do tend to be a little bit more vulnerable to any downturns.
Selina, in its report, MAS noted that the rise in unemployment has historically been associated with higher firm closures in the next quarter. To what extent will government support like the Jobs Support Scheme minimize lasting damage to the economy?
I think the job support scheme in itself basically tries to incentivize firms not to lay off workers in the first instance. So they may explore other cost-cutting measures, like what we have seen in terms of trying to pass on some of the property tax rebates and the rental rebates. Typically, I don't think the job support scheme itself will move the needle that much in terms of preventing firms from going under. I think we have seen from the three budgets, a lot of the measures are trying to tackle this from a holistic front. They're tackling the cash flow issues, they're tackling the credit access, and they're trying to tackle the wage costs during this period of the circuit breaker as well. So I think going forward, I think there seems to be still some openness to using fiscal policy to do the heavy lifting, but I do not think that is the job of the government to prevent firms from going under. I think, in fact, in an efficient and dynamic marketplace, you would always have some churn, some turnover, new entrants, and some exits as well. I think what we will clearly see is that the labour market indicators and also things like company liquidations typically lag the whole economic cycle. So you may actually have growth bottoming in the second quarter, but you will continue to see a pickup in both the unemployment picture and also the potential firm closures in the coming months and quarters.
Well, falling wages and a lower demand for labor, these effects from the pandemic have been known for some time now. So did anything in the MAS review come as a surprise to you, Selina?
Well, I think there are maybe two things that we have to look out for. The macroeconomic review did allude to the very big significant impact on private consumption. In fact, the hit to private consumption amounts to about 60%, comprising mainly of the non-essential services that's affected during this period of the 2-month circuit breaker. So what we'll see is that domestic demand has taken a very, very big hit. So although we do see government policies trying to alleviate some of the pain for both businesses and individuals, I think we may still take a bit of time for demand to recover and for confidence to return. So in that sense, I think the prospects for a recovery in the second half of the year may be still fairly subdued. So in that sense, our full year growth forecast is still probably in the range of a more severe minus 6% contraction. I think the second point really is that fiscal policy is clearly doing the heavy lifting. Monetary policy, as illustrated in the monetary policy statement at the end of March, basically they, after having done the recentering lower and also shifting the senior slope to a zero appreciation bias, essentially I think going forward the focus of monetary policy will be more prioritizing the managing of the liquidity situation and the currency volatility. So I do not expect any near-term monetary easing to come. In fact, if you look at the senior currently, which is hovering around parity of its band, I don't think there's any urgency for a further monetary policy easing at this juncture, and much less an out-of-cycle easing.
All right. Selina, just to round up our discussion today, do you have a timeline for when our economy can bounce back? And on that note also, what are the signs to look out for?
I would say we tentatively hope for a recovery by the second half. Whether it's going to happen in the third quarter, as I alluded earlier, would very much depend on whether the rest of the global and regional economies regain their footing after they start lifting some of the lockdowns. It's very hard to say at this juncture. I mean, even if you look at the IMF scenarios, for instance, when they talk about a global recession of -3%, they actually did have two other worst scenarios where if there are recurrent waves of infection and intermittent containment measures coming back on stream globally, then obviously the hit to the global economy is going to be more severe. I think for Singapore's case, it's also probably in the same boat. We are very much watching whether we'll get a peak and subsequent stabilization in the overall and also the resident infection numbers. And going out from here, whether we will actually see the circuit breaker being lifted on 1st of June, and how fast we actually see a lot of the social distancing and containment measures being gradually wound back. And then, life may slowly recover and get some semblance of normalcy from here. So my best guess would be later part of this year, but I suspect it would be closer to the fourth quarter rather than the third quarter.
Well, Selina, thank you so much for your time and analysis. We've been speaking to Selina Ling, Chief Economist at OCBC Bank. The Monetary Authority of Singapore said today that the COVID-19 outbreak will hit wages more than jobs. MAS also said Singapore's economy may contract by more than what was forecast. We want to hear from you, so share your thoughts in the comments.